Hello, well I'm busy making more of the Bucklehurst wallets for this lovely Russian hatch leather. And one of the sort of questions I get from quite a few people is, how do I cut out repeatable shapes? Because when you're making a wallet, you've got to ensure that all your T-slots, etc. all line up nicely and everything fits nicely. And one of the answers to that is, well, you could draw around a template and use like a clicker knife and cut out the parts. The real problem with anything like that, apart from the time it takes, is actually keeping accuracy up, because with a wallet everything's got to fit perfectly. So what I use are what are called steel rule die cutters, and you can order these. I make my own, but you can order them, and basically it's like a cookie cutter. It's a strip of steel with a cutting edge, a hardened cutting edge, and then they're very often either welded together or mounted around an acrylic or a wooden block of some sort, and you use them in a press to cut out the shapes of leather. I thought I'd say a little bit more about this because I've popped up a few films now where I've been sort of making bits of steel rule die, making various presses, and I think it's something where people seem to want to know a few more bits and pieces. So just first of all, commercial cutters. So this is an example. It's the Bucklehurst logo of a commercially made steel rule die cutter, sometimes called a clicker cutter. And what it is, it's the steel rule die. This is 2-point, which is very common, steel rule die, and it's been mounted in an acrylic block. Now this sort of thing, you send off a PDF or sketch or an Adobe format file to a die maker. They'll pop it through a computer and it will very cleverly bend all of this and make a perfect nice die like this one, and it's really good. You can buy a few actually ready-made. So here's an example of a ready-made one, which is for like a key fob, and this one's mounted into like a plywood. But it's the same principle, and you can get pins and things like that. Now, where you go to get these made, if you're in the UK, then really just Yellow Pages, Google steel rule die. This one I got made by Dixons. Unfortunately, they're now sadly closed and gone. But there are a lot of companies. If you look at steel rule die, you'll find things coming up, or clicker cutters. So I know, for example, near where I live, there's a place called Southern Dies that makes them. If you're in the States, I believe people like Texas Custom Rule and Die, is it Milwaukee Rule and Die, something like that. But if you look at steel rule die or cutting forms or leather cutting, etc., you should find something come up. If you want to be mad and make your own, I don't particularly advise it. It's actually quite tricky. You will need some sort of bending jig, and they're very hard to find, and if you buy them new, they are incredibly expensive. I got a second-hand one, but they don't come up. I've been looking for ages and don't come up often, so they're not easy to make your own. I have, as you probably know, tried various iterations. So I started off making chunky sunk into plywood ones. I then had like a Mark II where they were semi-exposed on the plywood, and my Mark III, which is holding up really well, it's basically bend the steel rule die to shape and then fill it in with a bit of wood and just nail it. And I've popped up sort of films on how I've been doing this. But as I say, you need some heavy duty equipment for the bending. So I have shown how if you have a very simple thing like a bag base, which is like an oval, you can do that with a ring bender, and there's a film on making that, and that worked fine. But if you're doing things like wallets, if you want to make your own, you're going to need to have a proper jig or something. So not an easy undertaking. And I'm not certain, I enjoyed the challenge of making my own. I'm not certain I'd do it again if I knew what a difficult journey it was going to be, but I now can make whatever I want, sort of cutter wise, so I did enjoy the challenge of it. But no, if you draw up some diagrams, you can send them off, and the die maker will make you a nice set of dies, lovely and accurately, and they'll come back to you and you can get cutting out. Now, that brings me on to the next sort of question I seem to get an awful lot of, and that is, what kind of press? Well, if you have the budget, you have the space, and you have a strong floor, you probably can't beat a nice hydraulic press, a clicker press. The reason I haven't got a clicker press is actually it's partly access, space and floor loading, because they weigh a ton, almost literally, and they are obviously big, fairly big items. They're hydraulic, they're built like tanks, so that would be a problem. You can, if it's a small lever item you want to be cutting out, like this logo, you can use a 2-ton ratchet arbor press, and you can cut out into quite thick veg tan, and it works. Taking it up a level, I mean, you wouldn't manage to cut out, I don't think, anything much bigger. So if you're trying to cut out like the frame of a wallet, I think you'd really struggle with an arbor type press to cut this out. Some people use a hammer and they hammer them out. So you could take a nylon hammer and then hit your die, put a metal plate over it perhaps to spread the load and hit it. That will work, but the trouble with hammering is that obviously you're getting a very uneven pressure, and you will in time probably vibrate or damage your die. So I don't think your die will last nearly as long as in a press. Some people use a garage bearing press, so the kind of press you take wheel bearings out with, and they work quite well. I have popped a film up on making notebook covers where I used one of those, and you can see me cutting out the notebook cover using quite a big die, so using a die like this one. And it works, as I say, reasonably well, because you pump the hydraulic up ram lever, and then after 30 seconds a minute, cut out your shape. It's a bit slow and clunky, but it does work. The cheap imported presses I found were not nearly as good as the sort of professional ones. So the one I have found, which is particularly good because it's nicely engineered, is the Sealy 15-ton hydraulic press. And that actually, it's the Sealy Premier, it's a black one. It's very good, nicely made unit, which for cutting out smallish items of this sort of size, it works really well. In fact, you can probably get quite a large bag base into it or something if you wanted. But I find that's got a good action on it. It's nice and level and flat and works really well. So I'd be quite happy recommending that one as a good medium point. Your other option, if you are just going to be cutting out things like wallet pieces or things like shoe soles, is to get a 4-ton press. So that's a clicker type press, manually operated, from the likes of Weaver Leather, and they're very nice. They are quite expensive. You could probably almost buy a hydraulic clicker press second hand for the same money, but they are very nice. They don't take up too much space, and they do a great job of cutting. I'll show you how I cut out some of my wallet T-slots using my cutter with the likes of the Weaver press, and it'll give you a bit of an idea as to what I mean about how it's quite easy to use and good for repeatable leather shapes. So let's do that next. So here I have one of my cutters, and if I place it down on I've got this sacrificial lever here to protect the bed of the press. But all I do is I line it up, swing the press over, and then down it goes, and you get a very satisfying noise, and it cuts it out. There it is, and I can literally just go down a strip, cutting out very accurate repeatable shapes. And it's as easy as that. Do one more. So it's quick, it's efficient, it's quiet, doesn't take up too much space, and I love it. There you are. Doesn't take too much pressure, you don't have to really pull. I mean, this is fairly thin leather, but you don't have to pull really hard on it either. So that's using a cutter to get repeatable shapes. Anyway, I hope you found that helpful to find out a bit more about how I cut out my leather shapes and make some lovely wallets. Certainly a good area to get into if you're wanting to produce quite a few items and you want to keep the quality and the accuracy high. Then going down the sort of route of having ready-made cutters with a press is certainly a worthwhile path to take, in my opinion. Anyway, I hope you found that one useful, and see you in the next film. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.